Friends, at this time we are going to begin the funeral services for Lenora Schur. If you have a cell phone or a pager, we would ask for you to please take a moment to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. And officiating today's services will be Rabbi Rachel Kaplan-Marks.
Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Esa einai el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri Me'im Adonai Osei Shamayim Va'aretz. We're here this morning to remember Lenora Schur. It's fitting to gather you, her beloved family, here in this sacred space. Because for Lee, family and community were everything. Her roles throughout life as a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother were inextricable from her very being. And to say that she was active in this community would be an understatement. In her own words, temple events have been intertwined and observed often in conjunction with Schur family milestones since the very first days of this congregation's existence well over 100 years ago. And so we settle into this moment of sacred memory. For Lee's life that united you, for her love which death cannot sever, for her companionship that you shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and her mind that brought you joy, we offer thanks. For all these and more, we are grateful. In times of loss and in times of pain, we turn to our tradition for guidance and perhaps even for solace. The psalmist rhetorically asks, "Who may abide in the house of the divine?" The psalmist goes on to answer his own question in a way that's a bit unexpected. For this privilege has nothing to do with religiosity. Rather, it has to do with integrity, with honesty, with loyalty, with the way in which a person interacts with the people in her life. Lee lived in the house of the divine, spending just shy of 95 years on this earth. Let's listen now to the words of the 15th Psalm as we reflect on her life. Adonai mi yagor ba'ohalecha mi ishkon bahar kodshecha. Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. Now, for more generations than we could possibly count, our people have turned to the words of the 23rd Psalm in moments of grief. Its imagery of dark valleys and serene meadows resonate. Because even as you are all deeply grateful for the time which you were blessed to spend together with Lee, and as you are grateful that she is no longer suffering, the pain of this loss is just as real. So we turn to the words of the 23rd Psalm, which remind us that none of us is alone in our pain. Let's listen now to the psalm first in Hebrew, and then we'll turn to our folders and recite it together in English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi shovev. Yancheni b'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begates al mavet, lo ira ra, ki ata imadi. Shivtecha uminshantecha, hema yanachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorerai, dishanta vashemen roshi, kosi revaya. Ach tov vachesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, Vishavti bevet Adonai laorech yamim. Let's continue together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our wise teacher Kohelet, also known as Ecclesiastes, teaches, "L'kol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim." There is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. Now is the time for speaking. I'll invite first Lee's sons, Larry, Paul, and John, followed by 3 of her grandchildren, Michael, Becky, and Brittany, to share words of sacred memory.
Though I didn't remember much about my early days, I do recall the black and white photos of our house being built the year I was born. What stands out most vividly, however, were the countless mornings when I trudged to school through blizzards with no sympathy from Mom. Her response was always the same: I walked a mile to school every day, and you can do the same. And yes, our walk to school was indeed a full mile. While some memories from those early days are still a bit foggy, others are as clear as day. I distinctly remember being forced to eat dry chicken and liver at dinner, only to sneak it under the table to feed the dog. And there was a time when I convinced Mom to let me redecorate my room. She probably didn't expect me to follow through, but I did. Purple was my favorite color, so I turned my room into what later would be known as the purple room. Purple carpet, purple wallpaper, purple drapes, purple bedding, purple lampshade, and even a purple ceiling. It was dark and not exactly conducive to studying, but I loved it. And I wasn't exactly known for getting into trouble as a child. I've been told many times that I was a good little boy. And yes, it's hard to believe there was no jail time, no drugs, and no trouble with the law. But there was one situation that stands out, looking back with a smile, though not so much at the time. It was my first experience with dating in high school. I was seeing a girl who wasn't Jewish. After much back and forth with Mom, who of course insisted it wasn't going to happen, I became defiant. Mom, in turn, decided to hide my glasses so I couldn't see to drive. I stormed out of the house and took the bus to her place. When I returned home, Dad was waiting for me with a belt. Ouch. One thing that was always clear about my mom was her unwavering passion for education. She was determined that her children would not only receive an education, but would strive for excellence. She made sure we had the encouragement and the resources to succeed, and always emphasized that a college degree was a key advantage in the workplace. As a speech therapist at my high school, I had no choice but to be on my best behavior. I was expected to speak properly, especially when around my other teachers at Mather. She also supported me in pursuing my own interests, even if they didn't align with Dad's path in engineering. In her later years, she found immense joy in joining the team that Elizabeth and I built in Las Vegas. For 10 years, she traveled there to help us produce large-scale events where she loved interacting with the thousands of people who attended. We had her stationed at the information counter, where she greeted everyone. She didn't always know where things were, but people adored chatting with her, often forgetting what information they actually came to seek. She loved every moment, attending shows and making close friends with our entire team, and of course, getting paid for it. Mom truly cherished visits from her kids and grandkids, and her belief in the power of education and a strong work ethic remained a guiding principle throughout her life. I've carried that belief with me, and I am grateful for the success that it has brought. We'll all miss you, Mom, more than words can express. Rest in peace.
Thank you for coming today. My mom was part of a generation of strong, motivated, and intelligent women who believed in the traditional roles of mother and wife. Mom received her bachelor's degree in speech pathology and audiology from Northwestern University in 1950, and in 1977, she earned a master's degree in learning disabilities from Northeastern University. She worked full-time for the Chicago Public Schools, but always managed to have dinner ready for Larry, John, and I, and later when my dad came home for work. She was not a great cook, and her idea of dinner was throwing a steak from the freezer right into the oven. I always thought steaks were served raw on the inside and tough as leather on the outside. Education was her highest priority. John and I were always interested in computers at an early age, and Mom always encouraged us, schlepping us to Radio Shack for parts and computer classes. In those days, parents weren't concerned where you were or what you were doing as long as you were home for dinner. Unlike the other kids on the block that were getting in trouble for throwing rocks in the alley, we were building computers, putting mice in cryonic suspension, wiring the entire house, and blowing things up on a ledge we made outside our bedroom window. I don't think Mom ever knew what we were doing, but she did know we were following a passion we had. Mom was the longest living member of this synagogue, Temple Beth Israel. Our family history with TBI goes back to the 20s when my grandparents were members. After Mom and Dad were married, the rabbi asked Mom to become advisor for the youth group. She became the first adult to have a bat mitzvah and was later nominated and elected to be the first woman board member. She told me that the president of Beth Israel usually called the meeting to order by saying, "Gentlemen." At her first board meeting, she was asked to go to the kitchen and serve refreshments, which she dutifully did without batting an eye. After a couple of board meetings, the president was reminded that she was present, and after that, he called the meeting to order by saying, "Gentlemen and Lee." Shortly after, Mom became member of the executive committee, vice president of Ways and Means, financial secretary, treasurer, and chair of the first art auction. Boating has always been an obsession with our family. Mom said she was not born into boating, but married into it. She helped Dad build his first boat, the Sure Thing 1, when Larry was 10 months old, steaming planks with a vaporizer upside down in the garage. She supported my dad's involvement as Commodore of Diversey Harbor Yacht Club, Lake Michigan Yachting Association, and 30 years with the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary, both in Chicago and Key Largo. The house they bought in Key Largo was really my father's dream and soon became our family's winter getaway. Mom made a life for herself there, and not just in boating. She became involved in the Keys JCC, took Hebrew classes, started a women's Seder, and taught English as a second language to locals in Key Largo. Our yearly trips included a visit to her students at the local Thai restaurant, where she was always greeted as, "Miss Lee, thank you for coming." Her biggest accomplishment, though, was leaving a legacy of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren with her values and commitment. I want to read to you something my mother wrote, which is far more beautiful than anything I could have written. "I am very proud of our sons for their professional success, but I am even prouder of them as honest, hardworking, moral, exemplary, involved fathers and husbands who have emulated the values of their parents and grandparents. No greater reward for a parent is when you see the results of your long-term parenting. And how about my dividends, my grandchildren? Maybe they will not think of their grandmother as so special as previous generations have, but that's okay. As long as they evolve and have the same ethics, values as previous generations and follow in their footsteps, that will be my reward. I have full confidence they will do so. Yes, I have been very lucky, probably not luck at all, that throughout most of my life, I have been the recipient of love, respect, responsibility, moral support, encouragement, good counsel, and treated as number one by many in their eyes, thoughts, and actions." This is just one of the many writings that I uncovered when going through my mom's papers. Finally, I want to personally thank Priscilla and her fabulous caregivers, especially Beth, Evelyn, Lonnie, and Melba. You were always there to help her and help provide care so lovingly over the last year and a half. You were always anticipating her needs. We could not have done this without your help. We consider you part of the family. Mom, you were incredibly strong, principled, and loving woman who left a mark on everyone you met. You passed on the values and ideals from past generations to your children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Know that each of us hold your memory dear and continue your legacy for generations to come. We love you and will miss you. Thank you.
Mom, you have been an amazing mother to my brothers and I. You have been a wonderful role model and have taught me how to be a good parent. You've always been there to support our dreams and desires, even when it was inconvenient for you. For example, Paul and I turned our basement into a science lab. You didn't seem to mind the crazy and sometimes dangerous experiments that we did with electricity, chemistry, explosives, and more. There were always several projects in progress strewn all over the basement. I recall one time when, for some unknown reason, I needed to push a glass test tube into a cork with a hole in it. Of course, that didn't end well. And you had to take me to the emergency room to fix my finger after the test tube broke. Even after this, you still encouraged us to continue experimenting, but maybe a bit more carefully. Your example taught me to support my kids in their explorations. We were always working on projects like potato cannons and trebuchets. When my son Reed was school age, we thought it would be cool to use a big solar lens to pop the top off a glass bottle. Well, instead, of course, the bottle exploded, and a trip to the emergency room for my son was the result. I guess sometimes history repeats itself. You gave much of your time to supporting my activities when I was growing up. A typical week would involve 4 or 5 trips from home to Temple Beth Israel for services, Hebrew school, choir, Boy Scouts, in addition to your own commitments to Temple. You joked that the car could follow the path to Temple all by itself, way before GPS and self-driving cars. When I joined a rock band in high school, we needed a place to practice. I was surprised when you said we could practice in our basement. So my bandmates and I created a practice space complete with a raised stage and lighting. We would practice on Thursdays, and after a few weeks, I noticed that you and Dad happened to have a date night every Thursday. You were a good sport about it all. Thanks for being there for my brothers and I, and for supporting us in so many ways over the years. You have been an example to me of how to live life through learning and exploration. You provided me with the confidence to fulfill my dreams in my professional and family life, and to set the same example for my own children. Mom, I will miss you very much.
All right, I'm going to try and do this without crying, but I've learned with my kids that sometimes I just get emotional, so bear with me here. Last week when I was visiting Grandma Lee, somewhere between the lighthearted jokes and retelling of memorable stories that attempted to break up the somberness of the moment, Rabbi, we straightened up as soon as you got there, I went over to look at what was on Grandma's fridge. Stuck on the magnets that I can remember seeing all the way down in Florida years ago, she held on to a lot of things, were photos of her and Becky riding a camel in bright orange hats in Israel circa 1997, and her and Grandpa Bob at a black tie event around the same vintage. There was a large Jewish National Fund magnet calendar highlighting all the important dates and holidays in 2021. There was a handwritten account of how long she had been a member of Temple Beth Israel. At the time, it was about 70 plus years, she said. There was also a small printout of an email to herself from September of 2012 titled, "Happiness is a Choice." On the quarter or so of a page were 6 numbered activities that implied, when done intentionally and consistently, again, see, can't control it, could increase happiness. Here's what they said. Say what you are grateful for each day. Do a fun activity every day for at least 15 minutes. Again, don't know why I do this. Think about a most meaningful memory each day. Consciously smile at least 3 times a day. Avoid negative situations and people. Make deep social connections as a buffer against depression. Well, I never thought what I saw on a fridge would be the inspiration, opening hook, whatever you want to call it, for a eulogy. The ideas and suggestions of this unknown author of looking for happiness and optimism on a day like today seems appropriate as we celebrate the life, of an extraordinary woman. So in this spirit, this morning I'd like to share some of the many things I'm grateful for through some meaningful memories of Grandma Lee and the incredible time we were all fortunate to share with her. Seriously, don't know what. Hopefully at least 3 of them will make you smile. One of the things that has resonated with me throughout the years is how Grandma took a deep interest in us, all of her grandkids and family. No matter where I was in the country, I came to expect and look forward to finding an envelope with that recognizable, large, swooping block handwriting in my mailbox. Without fail, inside would be a newspaper clipping of the latest news on an architectural project or critique by Blair Kamen from the Trib. On the top was always a note of what was going on with her that day, the weather, what the lake or ocean was like, and a question about my thoughts on the article. She cared about the things we cared about and let us know she was thinking of us. When we were together, she would make an effort to not just spend time with me, but also get to know my friends. Whether it was a family Shabbat dinners, inviting everyone onto her boat to shoot the breeze while I got everything ready, no one ever turned her down, or opening up her home in Florida to dive trips, she made sure to join us for dinner and drinks. Our full lives were important to her, and we knew that. But it wasn't just that Grandma was involved in a way that not all grandparents were growing up. It was also that she treated us with respect, and as adults, when we were kids, that stood out. The photo of Becky and Grandma on a camel with bright orange hats circa 97 is from the trip we took to Israel for my bar mitzvah. As many of you know, Grandpa Bob didn't fly, so Grandma joined my parents, Becky, Grandma Charlotte, and Grandpa Herbie on a grand tour of the country. The trip was covered all the hits, from the Dead Sea to the Kotel, Masada, Tel Aviv, and planting trees, etc. And as sometimes is the case with long trips with large groups to far-off places with lots of jet lag, little conflicts arose. Without airing all the dirty laundry here today, I distinctly remember one night when Grandma approached me and expressed how and why she felt a certain way about some of the tensions that were brewing. She had hoped I could see and understand her point of view and that we could both make some changes. To the 13-year-old me, this was super uncomfortable. But as I have grown up and now become a parent, what I admire and appreciate is her showing and teaching me that trust and a willingness to be vulnerable, even with a preteen, can solve issues, make things better, and strengthen relationships. There were things that Grandma taught us directly and lessons I feel lucky to have learned indirectly over time. When anyone talks about my grandparents, boating and key lime pie is one thing that will always come up. As Grandma noted in a letter once, Grandpa Bob's passion, other than me, she noted that, was boating. From summer vacations, traveling across the lake with my dad and uncles, anything and everything Coast Guard auxiliary, crafting a wardrobe filled with sweaters showcasing lighthouses from across the country, to building a second home in Key Largo where literally the only fun thing to do is on the water. My grandparents built their lives around that water. But the funny thing is, Grandma didn't know how to swim. Yet somehow it wasn't an issue. Grandma could regularly be seen doing water aerobics in the Harborage pool with bright orange water wings, like the ones kids wear, and zipped tightly into her life jacket before she headed out of the harbor onto the lake, or to go out fishing with Grandpa on the ocean with a big smile on her face, despite not having the key skill set for the activities that drove their calendars. As if through osmosis, we learn that just because you might not have a specific skill set or aptitude for things, it shouldn't hold you back from getting involved. We'll get there. Or doing the things that will help you make connections, be involved, and support someone you love's passion. While Grandpa's passion might, on the surface, have been the water and boating, both Grandma and Grandpa's true passion in life was their family. I once asked Grandma how her and Grandpa Bob, with so many different and often competing interests, made their relationship so strong. Her response was simple and straightforward. Family, she said. To Grandma Lee, family was everything. It was not just a construct, but a responsibility. It was the link between generations and what she would call our good genes. Family required love and commitment, but was easily realized by showing up, being involved, practicing a set of shared values. I feel incredibly blessed to have had a grandmother who modeled these convictions and showed us how to carry them forward to future generations. Lastly, I'm beyond grateful that not only was I lucky to get 41 plus years with you as my grandmother, and all of the memories, lessons, and love, here we go again, that go along with that, but that you were able to get to know and be a part of the family Felice and I have built, that you had gotten to quell and take pride with your great-grandchildren, and that you were able to build meaning relationships with them that I know they will bring with their families one day. Before I pass this off to Becky, I want to close out with what I think is a fitting way to approach today by coming back to the refrigerator. Because in addition to our 6 action items of happiness, and I hope all of us can bring some of those practices forward more often, there was also a eerily on-point fridge magnet from the Chicago Lighthouse that was sticking a yellow note card in her instantly recognizable swoopy handwriting with the note. Don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Thank you, Grandma, for all the memories. I love you.
You've heard about a lot of different facets of my Grandma Lee today. Grandma Lee, the family woman who would do anything to support her parents, her husband, her sons, her sister, her grandkids, and her great-grandkids. Grandma Lee, who not only bravely married into boating, but spent the half of the year living in a double-wide trailer on the ocean with a canal instead of a backyard. Grandma Lee, the educator and academic who spent her professional and personal life teaching, reading, and learning. What I want to focus on today is Grandma Lee, the activist. One thing that Grandma Lee was known for was her strongly held opinions, and she was never afraid to be vocal about what she saw happening in the world. When she wasn't glued to the hurricane forecast, she could be found carefully following the news. She wrote countless letters to the editor, to the Chicago Tribune and the Key West Citizen about everything from Senator Mark Kirk's voting record on issues of interest to senior citizens to the eyesore of used car lots lining US Highway 1. While going through her notebooks this past week, we found the phone number and email address for the White House, which I know that she made use of many times. Famously, Lee Schur once accosted Rahm Emanuel at O'Hare Airport to tell him just what she thought about what he was doing to the Chicago public schools and the teachers union. She was involved in Democratic Party politics and was once even asked to run for local office, which she declined. When then Governor Rod Blagojevich was on trial for corruption, she was absolutely mortified that she had once hosted him in her living room during one of his campaigns for office. Although frankly, considering Chicago politics, I'm surprised that didn't happen sooner. For all of her work in the local political sphere and beyond, though, to me, her enduring legacy comes from the choices that she made about how she would live her life in the face of obstacles. Many times she told me and any friend who would mention the name Northwestern that when she was there was a quota on the number of Jews that the university would accept. She pursued her career and worked full-time while raising a family, even though this was not the norm for women at that time. As we've heard, she was the first woman to serve on the board of Temple Beth Israel, and despite being a duly elected member of that body, she was asked to go to the kitchen to serve refreshments at her very first meeting. I heard these stories time and time again growing up, and I admit that I did grow impatient and probably rolled my eyes more than I should have. But the truth is that I never understood why these things were such a big deal, because the things that Grandma Lee experienced are inconceivable in my world. Jews couldn't go to college? What do you mean? Jews are everywhere. All you have to do is mention where you went to school and reflexively will play Jewish geography and find someone in common within minutes. Women didn't have careers. Women couldn't serve on shul boards. How could you possibly find enough people willing to volunteer for all of the committees if you only asked men to get involved? And why would you even serve on a board or stay at that shul for that matter if all they were going to do is send you to the kitchen? What I understand now, though, is that the world that I grew up in only exists because of a generation of women like Grandma Lee. When something was important to her, she didn't walk away from leadership or policies that she disagreed with. Instead, she chose the more difficult and the longer path. She chose to get involved, to be in the room, and to effect change from within. And I know that I am one of the many beneficiaries of all of that work. When Hillary Clinton lost the election for the presidency, she wrote her a letter of comfort. She talked about their shared values and what future generations stood to lose. And she ended by stating that hope springs eternal. It was clear that Grandma Lee understood that everything happening in the world, in the country, and locally had an impact on her life and on her family. But just as important, she understood that she could use her life and her voice to make necessary change in the world. Grandma Lee was a woman with absolute clarity of her values, and she lived her life in pursuit of them despite whatever obstacles may have arose. May her memory be for a blessing and for an inspiration.
I would like to share a few words about Lenora, or Grandma Lee to me. When asked to speak here today, I had a hard time thinking of something significant enough to talk about, but I could perfectly recall the smaller details, like the way her house smelled or the taste of her key lime pie. I remember walking to RJ Grunt's after a morning spent at the harbor in Chicago and cooking up fresh fish Jeremy and I caught off the dock in Florida, while my dad and I opted to eat pizza instead. I remember playing piano in the living room and board games in the den. Looking back, I realized that Grandma Lee will continue to be in my life in the same way these smaller, more intimate memories are. For example, she'll be with me during my countless morning coffees and every time I take my dog for a walk. Did you know it was Grandma Lee who gave me my first spoonful of sweet caffeinated bliss at 4 years old? Needless to say, I was hooked, and 21 years later, I still drink my coffee just like her. Cream and sugar with just a hint of coffee. If you know my grandma, you know she was also extremely active. From walking in the mornings to doing water aerobics, she instilled in me the importance of staying active. I remember one time I came up to visit her in Florida during one of my school breaks. As a teenage girl, there really was nothing more important than sleep, but Grandma Lee would come knocking at 5 in the morning to take me on a 3-mile walk. We talk about everything and nothing at the same time. Life, family, dreams, or just the beauty of the quiet morning. Those walks weren't just about exercise. They were about connecting, about sharing space and time in a way that felt easy and effortless. And now, even though those walks are over, I know those conversations and lessons will stay with me every time I lace up my shoes and step outside. Grandma Lee had a way of showing love in the simplest of actions. She didn't need grand gestures to make an impact. It was in her quiet presence, her thoughtful words, and her unwavering support. As we gather here today to say goodbye, I know she'll continue to be a part of me, of all of us. She lives on in the moments we carry forward, the morning coffee, the walks, the laughter, and the quiet moments in between. And while I may miss her physical presence, I find comfort in knowing that she's always with me, and the memories I hold dear and the love she so generously gave. Thank you, Grandma Lee, for being the heart of our family, for teaching me the value of kindness, and for showing me how to appreciate the finer things in life. You will never be forgotten, and your love will continue to guide me every day in every little thing that I do. I love you always.
We find ourselves now firmly situated between our springtime holidays, between Purim and the festival, of course, of Pesach. As the earth is renewing itself, we Jews busy ourselves with remembering. The season began as we remembered to forget Amalek, and it continues as we remember our most foundational narrative, our remarkable journey from degradation to redemption. We are told again and again that the story of our ancestors' redemption isn't just a story, and it isn't just a history, but it's our memory. We transmit memory through the generations as if we ourselves were there. And in that way, we find connection and meaning in our past. Lee valued memory. She wrote it all down. She and Bob built a loving home together. For Lee, as you've heard, family was everything. She embraced her role as a wife, a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She was always interested in what each member of the family was up to. Lee was well educated and she was bright. Having attended, as you've heard, Northwestern and earning a degree in speech pathology, and then later earning a master's degree in order to help students with learning disabilities. She wanted the very best education for her children. She always wanted them to strive for the next level. Lee was supportive in all of the paths chosen by her children and grandchildren. In 2018, on the occasion of Temple Beth Israel's 100th anniversary, Lee wrote down and delivered a beautiful account of her personal involvement here at her beloved TBI. It's fitting to share some of those reflections in this season of remembering, because our community is better for having the Singer and Schur families, and for having Lee in particular giving of herself over these many years. In her own words, she wrote, "Service, volunteering, dedication, financial commitments have been lifelong through many decades and generations." She was proud that Bob was the scoutmaster of Troop number 898 here at TBI, ultimately bringing more families into the fold. And Lee recounted how, as a young bride, still a student at Northwestern University, Rabbi Lorge Alav HaShalom urged her to become the junior advisor of the youth group, a group that held great meaning for the Schur family. It was there that Karen and Paul met years later. You've heard already, but it bears repeating, that Lee was the first woman on the all-male board at TBI. She loved to tell about that experience, how at first it was Lee serve the cake, but later it was Lee chair the Ways and Means Committee, Lee chair the program committee, Lee chair the education dinner committee. And she handled all of these commitments with grace and dedication, alongside having significant professional responsibilities and responsibilities at home, all of which she took very seriously. Beyond her involvement with Temple leadership, Lee was a true lifelong learner, becoming the very first adult bat mitzvah here in 1980 with Rabbi Lorge. She loved attending classes, lectures, taking part in discussion groups, and really digging in not only to Jewish tradition, but to be involved in the Jewish community through study. Lee appreciated her roots, her Jewish roots, and specifically all that she learned from her dear parents, Shirley and Maurice Singer, Zichronam Livracha. From them, she learned to be honest, to strive to do her best, to ask questions, and to advocate for what one needs, to value her health. Lee was a woman of great integrity and honesty. She was the link between the generations of her family in her youth and the generations of her family in her advanced age. She understood and valued the importance of memory, memorializing not only details, but preserving the story and its meaning. So in this season of remembering, I pray that you, her dear family, will continue to remember, to write down, and to retell Lee's story for generations to come. We pray now that Lee will rest peacefully as her soul is bound up in eternal life. I'll invite you all to please rise. El Malay Rachamim, Shochen Bam Romim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Leah Bat Maurice Visara, Shahacha La'olama, Baal Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Knafav La'olamim, Vitzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar, Amen. God of abundant mercy, God Most High, may the soul of Lenora Lee Singer Schur, our loved one who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever, so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace, as together we say, Amen. Please be seated.
Friends, this concludes the services here at the synagogue. The interment and burial services will continue at West Lawn Cemetery in Norridge. For those of you traveling with us to the cemetery in the funeral procession, please do keep the following safety precautions in mind. Please make sure that your bright headlights and your four-way hazard flashes are on at all times. Please be sure to obtain an orange funeral safety sticker for your windshield, and we will be providing several of the cars in the procession with a magnetic orange flag to be placed on top of your roof. Please travel as close as safety permits to the car in front of you to avoid any gaps in our procession. For your own safety and security, I would suggest not speaking or texting while driving to the cemetery in the funeral procession. As we make our way through the various intersections, if the car in front of you proceeds through the intersection, even if the light does change, please proceed with extreme caution. Feel free to use your horn liberally and make every effort so that we can keep our procession together on our way to the cemetery. Following the interment, and later today, the family will be together at the Schur residence at 77 Crestview Drive in Deerfield, today from 6:30 until 9 p.m., and then Tuesday and Wednesday from 1 until 4, and resuming again from 6:30 until 9 p.m. with a minyan at 7:30. The family has also requested any memorial contributions made here to Temple Beth Israel. All of that information is available in the service folder that you should have received when you came into the sanctuary. If you did not receive one as you came in, we do have those for you as you leave. And for those of you joining us online, all of the information regarding Shiva and memorial contributions is available at our website, chicagojewishfunerals.com. The following individuals have been asked to serve as pallbearers: Brittany, Jeremy, Michael and Rebecca, Andrea and Bobby Schur, Marcy Baracello, and Michael Kahn. At this time, I would ask everyone to please rise and stand in place. We'll ask for the pallbearers to come forward to my left as we escort the casket, the family, and the rabbi from the sanctuary.